Hello, my name is Svetlana Stone. You are watching Artist Voices, where we believe it's essential for artist voices to be heard. We are pleased to have Josiah DeNooyer here at Public Media Network to learn about what it takes to be a musician or artist in 21st century.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Josiah, for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. We are glad to hear you and would like to learn who you are and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you get to Kalamazoo.
Yeah, that's a great question. So what brought me to Kalamazoo initially was my education. So I'm currently a senior at Western Michigan University's Jazz Studies program studying drum set. And I met the professor of drum set there, Keith Hall, when I was 15 years old at a camp that he hosted. And that's kind of the first time I was introduced to Kalamazoo as a city. I loved how small it was, but also how many different artistic opportunities there were available, which I realized pretty quickly. And so when the time came to choose a college, I felt really connected to this city just because of the relationships I'd already built up there, the musicians that I knew, the other artists, because of Keith, because of the drum studio, and all those things. So that's kind of how I ended up in Kalamazoo. I'm originally from Grand Rapids, Michigan, so just up the road about 45 minutes north. And yeah, that's in a nutshell how I've got here.
And how old you were when you were introduced to music and when you realized that it's your passion? You told that you were, when you were 15 years old, you start.
Yeah, when I was 15 is when I was first introduced to Professor Hall's drum camp, but I've been playing music since I was probably 5 or 6.
And how was you introduced to that?
Yeah, my
story behind that?
there's a lot of stories. I'll just have to pick a couple. My mom always played a lot of classical music around the house, a lot of Beethoven, a lot of Mozart, and a lot of Vivaldi. It was that and bluegrass, which are very interesting together. But that's kind of what I grew up hearing, and when I was about, I think I was 6 years old, I started taking piano lessons from one of her friends. And I didn't enjoy it at first. I didn't want to play piano. I thought it was weird, and I would have rather been outside with my neighbors doing stupid things. But my mom sat me down and was like, this is going to be good for you. And I really started to attach to the idea of playing music in it probably took about a year. So by the time I was 7 and a half in there, I was like, okay, I kind of enjoy this. So then from there, I started then learning percussion when I was about 8. And it worked out well because where I was homeschooled, so where I went to school was like a small fine arts program. And in order to get into the band on percussion, you had to play piano for 2 years first. So that's when I was like, oh, okay, Mom, you knew what you were doing, making me stick through it. So yeah, so I started playing percussion in the beginning band, and then from then on, from age like 8 to 17, I was in the concert bands, I was in choirs, I was in the jazz bands, jazz combos, drumline, small ensembles, just kind of started eating it up, and just really enjoyed all of those things, all the community that I ran into in that space. Once I got into high school is when I really started kind of making that my own. So, playing with my own combo of some friends, a group of like 5 or 6 other musicians, primarily like jazz and other improvised music, and then playing at church a lot more. I went to a church that had a gospel choir, so I had the privilege to play with them a lot growing up, which was great. And then it kind of just naturally segued into me coming to Western and studying music here. So, yeah, those are the important stories.
It's a great stories.
Yeah.
It's a great stories.
I'm grateful to be here.
And People always, I myself was seeing a couple of your performances. These
Yeah.
people see you and it's look like you're virtuosa playing so easy. But we would like to learn, I'd like to learn, what does it take for you to get where you are right now? What it mean to be a musician at
Yeah.
21st century?
Yeah, yeah. Those are two very big questions. The first one, I think, what does it take, or what has it taken for me to get to where I am now? First of all, I wouldn't be anywhere in music and in life without the help of the people who have supported me, who have encouraged me, starting all the way from my mom when I was 6. Music teachers I've had, definitely a couple that come to mind are my jazz band instructor, Mr. Moore. Shout out to Mr. Moore if he's watching. He lives in Texas now. Really big influence. My first drum set teacher, Madison George, who just moved to Nashville. Shout out to Madison if you're watching. And another really big one was obviously Professor Hall. So I don't think I would be doing music if it was for those people in certain capacities. So that's a big part of me getting to where I am now. It's just the mentorship. That's a really big thing in this music community in general, is you learn from the people who have done what you've done before you. And that's a really beautiful thing that I'm really grateful for. In addition to that, it obviously doesn't just happen. You know, it's not like you wake up one day and, oh, you're my teacher, so I'm good. There's a lot of time spent practicing, reading about music, playing with other musicians, collaborating, doing certain other things consistently that all contribute to your art, to your craft. It's the stuff that nobody sees that really kind of separates you from other musicians. It's the hours spent alone. It's the things you learn on your own time when you're really just like focused on something. So those two things, personal practice and development, and then obviously the mentorship of others. And then I think the third that really rounds it out and keeps me going is getting to do that with other people. That's what I think I really realized over the past couple of years, since the pandemic started, was I love music, but as much as I love music itself, I love creating it with other people. And that's a huge motivator and a huge reason why and how I'm able to do what I do today is because of the people that I'm surrounded by. So, yeah.
What's the average of time you spend for preparation for your performance or for the piece you try to learn to work with other musicians?
Yeah.
Like the average?
Yeah, it totally depends on the situation and the performance. So I had my junior recital in the spring at Western, and I composed all the music for it except for one of the songs, and arranged it, rehearsed the band. It was a very long process, right? I started writing that music in, I want to say, it was about September when I started actually putting it on paper. I had ideas since probably July. But I started actually writing that down in September, and I didn't finish composing the music until January, the end of January, and then arranging it for the ensemble that I had, and then rehearsing the group. We had 3 rehearsals, and coordinating all of that, just all the nitty-gritty details, adjusting it, taking it to Andrew Rathbun and taking his critique and changing things, revisiting things, reworking things. And then finally the recital itself was February 24th. So that process, that was something that was very personal, close to my heart. For that specific performance, there was months and hours, at least
6 months, right? At least 6.
Yeah.
And to perform like 1 hour, how long was it?
It was about 50 minutes.
50 minutes, and it was besides the experience you already had, just for this specific performance.
Just for 50 minutes.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and every minute was worth it. It was kind of surreal. You get done and, I was just walking out on stage after playing the last piece from behind the drums, and it was just like, and now we're done. And then at the same time, it's like you're not done. You know, you're just starting. It's like, what's the next thing?
What's the next
the
project?
next project? Yeah, how can I be better? How can I be different going forward? But yeah, it was, I don't know, at least 100, 200, 300 hours, at least. Not including personal practice time, but it's all such a beautiful and rewarding thing. You know, you learn so much about people, about things you care about, from doing that, and I'm really grateful for every moment I spent doing it. Not to say it wasn't hard sometimes, but yeah, but then also you have, you know, a performance, like for instance, I might have a gig at the Dormouse Theater downtown or something, and I'll send music out to the band members a couple weeks before, and we might have one hour rehearsal, and then we hit. You know, and that's the beauty of like improvised music, which is what I play a lot of, is everyone has a similar language that we speak from, and so we're able to prepare things very fast because we kind of come from the same musical background. It's kind of like if, you know, you're speaking Spanish with someone who also knows Spanish, you don't have to teach them Spanish to speak with them in Spanish, right? It just happens because you both have a similar vocabulary. So, yeah, there's two ends to the spectrum. You know, it can happen with hours and hours of preparation, or sometimes performances happen with 2 or 3 hours.
And besides that, you're taking other classes, right? You need
Right.
to do a homework.
Yeah.
Because you're a student.
Right.
And I don't know if you have job that you do on the
Yeah,
side. You know, it's all together. It's not that you just have these hours. You basically so much to do, and besides that, you're working on your music.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm hoping to get to a point where, you know, I can spend most of my time
on music,
just like creating music, right? Playing it, performing it, creating it. Right now, that's not realistic. You know, I teach music, which is beautiful. I teach a lot of, I have like, I think 14 students between my personal studio and studio downtown, and then I teach at an after-school program. I play at a gospel music gathering once a month, play at other churches. So there's a lot of other things we have to do as musicians, not to mention other gigs, other things like that. But it's all, you know, eventually it's all for the goal of really getting our vision. For me, at least, it's about eventually working towards how do I communicate my vision and my idea of what music means to me through my music as a main way of living. And that's the goal, ultimately, is to do that. And these other things are beautiful, and, you know, live in the moment, and I always try to take advantage of and pour myself completely into them. But at the same time, there's always that greater, okay, what am I really working towards? What do I really love, and what do I know I care about that I really want to do? That's always at the back of your mind, at my mind at least, as an artist and as a musician here in Kalamazoo.
So welcome to Artist Voices, and for those of you who just tuned in, we are here at Public Media Network with local musician Josiah DeNooyer to learn about what it takes to be a musician at 21st century. And my next question will be to you, Josiah. What are you trying to tell to people through your art, through your music?
Yeah. That's a great question. The first thing I think of when people ask me that question is something I read in the back of an Octavia Butler book, who's a great author that I love and am very inspired by. She was asked the same question when someone was reviewing one of her books, Parable of the Sower, and her response was really captivating to me because I kind of feel the same way about music. And she said, I have certain ideas that I want to communicate through my writing, but the power of the reader is just as important in interpreting those ideas in their own individual and personal lives as is my power in communicating them. So I guess to answer that question, my own personal ideas or my own things, my vision, what I want to communicate through art is a few things. I want to...
Or achieve.
Yeah, achieve or communicate. those are two different things. But I'll talk about communicating through art. What I want to communicate through art, number one, is just how deep our humanity is, and how closely tied together we are. I think in the world, especially right now, we're really divided. We're very easily put into boxes and categories and separated from people who we think are different from us. But something that ties us all together, I think, is music and is art and is emotion.
I like it.
And regardless of our gender, our racial or ethnic background, our religion, we all feel things on a certain level. And so one of my goals with music that I create is to make people feel something and hopefully deepen their understanding of how to feel for others too. And that takes a lot of different shapes, depending on what's on my heart, what's on my mind at the time. But that's kind of one of the things I want to communicate through art, is just how can we feel together, how can we feel for each other. Yeah, that's one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And my next question will be about what is the best advice you would what is the best advice you ever received from other musicians?
Yeah. I think what comes to mind, my first year of college, this was, I think, 3 years ago, Carl Allen, who's a very, very well-known, very respected, specifically jazz drummer in like the post-bop kind of musical setting, he came to Weston and he gave a master class. And I remember we were in rehearsal C, and he brought out this whiteboard and he drew a wagon wheel on it. And he didn't say anything. This is the very beginning of the class. So it was like everyone was thinking, why is he drawing on a whiteboard to start the class? It was dead silent. He was drawing on this whiteboard. And so he draws a wagon wheel, draws all the spokes, and he puts the marker down, walks over to his chair, sits down, and says, "You're probably wondering why I drove a wagon wheel, why I drew a wagon wheel." And we're all like, yeah, what's up with that? He said, because you as a musician, your career needs to represent this wagon wheel. And the more spokes you have on the wagon wheel as a musician, the faster and better you'll be able to turn, better be able to spin, whatever you want to say. And that really hit me because up to that point, I had really thought being a successful musician was being the absolute best you could at one thing and being very closed-minded and focused. That's important. We all have to be focused in what we care about.
That's true.
It's like regardless, right? You have to have a deep passion
That's
and a
true.
deep focus. And sometimes honing in on one specific thing is what you need to do. But it really opened my mind to realize that, yes, okay, playing is important. Being able to play your instrument well, period, important. Also important is how you take care of your relationships around that music, how you are able to do other aspects of music, like teaching. Are you a good teacher? Can you produce music? Can you write music? Can you lead a band? Can you record music? Can you A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right? All these other things. And realizing that each one of those abilities actually contributed to the other in a certain way, right? If I write really difficult music, then I have to learn how to play the difficult music. So it's like I'm informing one of the spokes with another spoke on the wagon wheel. And so that analogy has really stuck with me from a very senior and very respected musician. And I'm always questioning, like, how can I guess, diversify my musical interests, and not just, like, practically, like, different abilities, but also different, like, respecting different traditions, different musical traditions. So, like, yeah, I play a lot of Black American music, a lot of improvised music, but what about music from South America, which is also super informs the music that I play a lot? What about music from West Africa? What about music from other places? Because those are all parts of the wagon wheel too. So it's a lot more than just like the practical, okay, I do this, this, and this. It's like, oh, let me understand these different aspects of music from a cultural perspective too, because they're all important.
This is very interesting because it's not anymore being musician. You have to play just one instrument and mastering your skills on that.
Yep.
It's more aspects that you just explain, involved, knowledgeable about technology, communication skills, promotion, marketing, all.
Yeah.
That's yeah. It's not anymore like people like have this stereotype musician. It's just you play an instrument or we have to know a lot.
Yeah.
And you just very well described that.
Yeah. There's been
It's huge.
a huge, like you said, a huge shift away from that in the past. I think when people started realizing that a lot of, specifically like record labels and managers were like abusing or using them in certain ways, there was a big push towards becoming an independent artist.
Independent artist, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a big person who really started an aspect of that was Jacob Collier, right? Like I think he started a GoFundMe to fund his entire first album. And like,
Wow.
there were other people who had been independent artists before that, but so many people now are their own managers, their own producers, their own, they might even be their own label managers, their own ABC, all these other things, as well as playing the music. So, yeah,
You have to know all these things.
it's a broad field. Yeah.
So speak about challenges. What is the biggest challenges that you think the artists face?
That's a great question. I'm going to speak from my experience as an artist, personally.
Can speak from your experience.
Because everyone's is different.
Yeah.
I think one of my personal biggest challenges, and one that I've seen in, I'm going to speak specifically in the jazz community that I know fairly well, not only here but in New York and in other parts of the country. One of the biggest challenges, I think, for jazz musicians, if you don't like that word, improvising musicians, there's a lot of talk about that. But we're going to use that just for the sake of understanding. A big thing that is difficult in that field is being relevant to what's happening now musically and now socially through the music that we play. A lot of jazz music seems to have gotten stuck in like the 1960s, and the music itself didn't, but a lot of people studying it now seem to think that it did. And so one of the challenges, especially for younger artists, and that I felt a lot, is how do I respect the deep tradition and legacy of this music, right? The fact that this was really important, really revolutionary, really powerful at the time that it happened. How do I respect that tradition and also create something that's relevant to what's happening now, and that people relate to on, like I said earlier, an emotional level, right? Because it's not, spang, spang-a-lang. It's cool, it's great, it's awesome. But it doesn't relate to a lot of people on an emotional level. And that is something that is really important, I think, for humanity, but also for especially young artists, is, how does this relate to people? And so I guess there's a lot of different ways to kind of work through that, but relevance, I think, in this field specifically, of like, how do I make music that relates to people and that makes people feel something and still respect what happened 60, 70 years ago on a deep level? Because a lot of the music that I play and that I love is informed by people like Miles Davis, who was a huge innovator, people like John Coltrane, people like Wayne Shorter. I mean, one of my favorite artists now was like a Miles Davis disciple, Ambrose Akinmusiri. And so the legacy continues, but it really becomes a question of how can I use this in a new way that's relevant. Someone I think who's really great at that is Robert Glasper, Terrace Martin, that kind of the West Coast get down type of group over there. And so those are people that I look up to and that I learn from and take notes from. But yeah, that's kind of a big challenge for specifically me, and specifically I've seen in my community of musicians too. So yeah, among others.
Thank you for sharing. Josiah, how our audience can find information about you? Do you have a website? About your performances, maybe future performances, if you can share with us this information, and if anything else you would like to add besides that, you are very, very welcome to do that.
Yeah.
But it's great. I'm sure our audience would like to learn more about you and your performances,
Yeah.
about your music. So
Definitely.
how they can find it.
Yeah, so there's a few good ways to stay in touch with me. The first is through my website, super easy, josiahdenooyermusic.com. I have links to other social media there as well. So my Instagram, you can follow me there. That's a mix of music and personal things, because I believe our lives as musicians should be personal and not just about a product. So yeah, website, Instagram. I'm on Facebook. That's not really a music thing primarily. And then I have a YouTube channel as well.
Is it also under your name, Josiah?
Yep.
DeNooyer?
Yeah, all this is under my name. And there's links to everything in my website. I have performances there. I have to update the upcoming performance schedule. Things have been slow coming back in Kalamazoo. But yeah, that's the best way to stay updated on what I'm doing, what I'm creating, anything that I am working on, anything that I'm participating in. That'll all be shared in some way through those things. Or just stop by my house and say, hey. That's another way to do it too. So I love talking to people. So
That's awesome. So
yeah.
that's awesome. Anything else you would like to add or tell to our audience?
No, just take the time to be you and explore what you love. Pay attention to what you love, and pursue it. But yeah, thank you so much for having me.
We are so thankful, and
Yeah.
well, this concludes this episode of Artist Voices, where we believe it's essential for artist voices to be heard. And again, we are so thankful to Josiah DeNooyer for joining us tonight. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.